So, I was not aware that I was Palestinian until I was 13. No, don't get me wrong, I actually knew that I was Palestinian, but I was not actually aware of my Palestinian-ness in a sense that I played with my cousins every summer, but I actually grew up in New Jersey, in a small town called Kenilworth, New Jersey, where my mother grew up. And it was a town of all Italians who had immigrated from Italy 50 or 60 years before, and none of them spoke English. The family that lived above me, the father was actually the head of the northern New Jersey mafia, and I used to play with his kids until they disappeared. And the woman next door, I still don't remember her name, we called her La Signora. She used to bring me biscotti every day. So you can imagine my shock when my family uprooted me at the age of 9 to Orange County, California, where my first day of the 3rd grade, I walked into a classroom full of blonde girls with freckles and really cute Roxy t-shirts and necklaces made of hemp. I felt really uncomfortable in my purple leggings, and my coolness factor never increased. I thought it would be a good idea to become a theater geek, and I wasn't like the really cool musical theater geeks. I was really into Shakespeare, so I actually starred as Hamlet in Hamlet. So I really had no additional reasons to stand out in middle school especially. But the story begins in 1998, actually, in Mrs. Mieres's 8th grade history class. Mrs. Mieres was obsessed with National History Day. Every year, her students had to compete in the national competition. And National History Day had a theme every year, and this year was people, migration, and culture. And you had a choice. You had the option to do a short film, an artistic display, or a theatrical presentation. So you can imagine what I chose. And I was really excited because it was my opportunity to tell the story of my mother's side of the family and how they immigrated from Italy through Ellis Island. And I was all excited, and I go to Mrs. Mieres with my topic, and she's like, "No, that's really boring." She looked at me and she said, "Isn't your father Palestinian?" And I said, "Yes." She's like, "No, I think you should do the Jewish migration to Palestine and the impact that it had on the Palestinians." I had no idea what she was talking about. I went home really confused, and my mother had a little smirk on her face, went to a special drawer where she kept all things that she wanted to preserve and keep nice, all her special things, and she pulled out a book. And she handed me that book. She says, "I think you need to start with this." And I looked at it, and it said, "The Question of Palestine" by Edward Said. And that book launched 3 or 4 months of research where I learned about the 367 displaced Palestinian villages. I learned about the Nakba. I learned about my own family's role in the resistance and in driving refugees to safety to Lebanon, and in post-1948, even actively participating in the human rights and civil rights movement. I recruited my uncles to do interviews with all the oldest members of our family, and they actually collected over 100 primary resources, interviews, collected old passports, photos, birth certificates, death certificates, all saying Palestine on them. And I was so excited because this was a side of myself that I never even knew existed, and I felt for the first time a part of a cause. And I was so excited to go and tell Mrs. Mieres and present in front of my class. So the requirement for class was to present at Parents' Night, which was happening in April. And the dress rehearsal was actually in front of our class, so I had to perform in front of my peers and the students. And I based my performance off of my great-grandmother's story. My great-grandmother was from a small village next to Nazareth called Safuriye. And in 1947, the Haganah, a Jewish terrorist group, invaded Safuriye, and my grandmother and her family fled to Nazareth, where they now still live. And in their place, a Jewish family moved and still lives there to this day, and my uncles took a picture of the house and sent it to me, and I used it as the backdrop of my performance. So I get to class, I'm all excited, and I launch into my theatrical monologue about my family's and my great-grandmother's story. And at the end, there's a half-hearted applause, but then hands start going up. Are you a terrorist? Mrs. Mears, why are you allowing her to support terrorism? Mrs. Mears, this is anti-Semitic. Mrs. Mears, Israel is for the Jews. Who are the Palestinians? The best response I got was from a really good friend of mine that was trying to be supportive, and she came up to me and was like, oh my God, I didn't know that I was friends with a Pakistani. So it didn't end there, though. The students went home to their parents, and the parents in turn complained to the school that the school was giving a platform to anti-Semitism, that they were giving a platform to a student that was supporting terrorism. But the school and my Mrs. Mears stood by me. But Mrs. Mears felt that it was very important that she come clean to my parents and myself. And so she sat us down one day after school and said, you know, I wasn't expecting this response. But I will say that I did push Vanessa to do this topic for one reason. A boy in my class, Kenton Feibel, he was the most popular boy in school, and I had a crush on him since the 4th grade. He was doing his topic on the creation of the State of Israel because his grandfather was a militia leader in the Haganah and became a general post-1948 in the Israeli army. And she felt that it would be important on Parents' Night for someone to tell another side of the story. I think it was at that moment that I realized and became aware of what being Palestinian was. And it wasn't playing with my cousins in Palestine. It wasn't the fact that I spoke Arabic or didn't speak Arabic. It was the fact that in my DNA was the need and the desire to resist and to speak out. And there was no way at this point in my life, even at the age of 13, that I could just go with the flow. And so Mrs. Mears gave me the option. She said, you've already gotten an A. You don't have to perform at Parents' Night. But I think it would be good if you didn't. And there was no question in my mind that I had to do this. So I went with my parents, knowing what I was facing. Kenton went first, and then I went. And afterwards, the only person that came up to us was Kenton's grandfather. And he shook my dad's hand, and he looked at me and he said, you did a very good job. So it didn't end there. Actually, Mrs. Mears chose me to go on to the Orange County Regional Competition, and I won first place. And afterwards, I actually made it to the state competition. And this is important because I made it to the top 3, but the day of the finals was May 14th, 1998. It was the 50th anniversary of the Nakba. And it was a very important performance for me, and I actually ended up not winning. I was actually disqualified because I went over time by 20 seconds. The girl that won did her presentation on the Italian migration to Ellis Island. But it didn't matter, because that topic was boring anyway.